Hello, welcome back. Alex Phillips with you until 1 o'clock with Alan Mendoza all the way through till 1. I hadn't realised I had him for a full 3 hours. Thank goodness for that, because I've started making a little list of the topics Alan and Alex really need to discuss over the next 2 hours with you as our company, because blimey, he's such a brilliant and interesting man, and I just love picking his brain. And you can join me in doing so. Let's get on the blower to Paul, who's in Devon. Hi, Paul.
Yes, good morning, Alex. Question for you, or an observation. Seeing as, when we turn on the TV in our mainstream media, whether it's on the TV or in the newspaper or on the internet, all we see is riots by right-wing radicals, right-wing extremists, white supremacists. It's 24 hours a day in your face. Does nobody ever ask, what about the left-wing extremists and the left-wing radicals
Paul,
that run our government and our local government?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, there was the Labour councillor who was talking about cutting throats and so forth. But you've sort of got me onto one of my favourite pet subjects at the moment. As I've got the well-informed Mr. Mendoza, Dr. Mendoza with me, I'm going to ask him, which is, do we have a far-left problem in the UK? And I'm not talking about whether, the stormtroopers are going to come and arrest me. I thought they were. We had window cleaners come up the window, literally during the advert break, and I was like, here we go, my collar's going to be felt. But when I see things like the Socialist Workers' Party shouting Nazi scum off our streets, which I think is a bit extreme, that sort of language, and their tweets say things like, let's stamp on the necks of the far right. And of course, that means in their mind, Reform UK, the party that I was at one point associated with, so I can't wait to have my neck stamped upon. In America, we know that there's Antifa, that I would imagine is being very heavily infiltrated by hostile regimes and manipulated to create havoc. Do we have that in the UK?
Well, we probably don't have it in the same sense as the Americans do in Antifa. But yeah, we've seen, haven't we, far leftists in the form of Extinction Rebellion and co, and the damage they've caused. Just Stop Oil, what they've caused, basically. You've seen the jail sentences that have gone to those people, finally, for having caused mass disruption and, sort of indirectly, probably deaths of people who couldn't get to hospital or things like that. So, we've seen that there is a far left-wing problem. There's also a far left-wing problem if you look at the Palestinian hate marches that go on. Those are organised not simply by Islamist groups, but also by the far left. So they're organised and they do work together. It's interesting that they've got a very organised network of their different offshoots who do come together for their pet causes, and they do try and promote them in that way. But we rarely talk about it in the same way as people are very excited to do about the far right. And look, the far right is a really easy target because nobody likes the far right. But actually, once you think about it, nobody likes the far left either, and we don't talk about it.
How concerned should we be about this marriage of convenience between the far left and Islamists? Actually, it has echoes of history where these two forces, who love a bit of authoritarianism, have come together for pretty disastrous consequences. And it's interesting that you talk about the pro-Palestine marches, which I think in some respects were the sort of the muse, if you will, of the riots we've then later on seen. This is actually having a huge impact on the fabric and cohesion of our society.
Well, the reality is, once you allow one mob to come out into your streets and you don't control them, you then lose the ability to control what next mob might turn up. And you can't suddenly go, I didn't like that mob, that mob's okay, because that's not how mobs work. People look at what justice is meted out and what order is preserved, and they then go, well, that group seems to be getting away with it, I'm going to do the same thing. So that's why it's so important to apply standards across the board and to nip these things in the bud very early. You nip them in the bud early, then you don't have violence later. And that's what we fail to do. And that, as I said, that coalition between the far left and radical Islam is very dangerous because both sides think they're going to win the argument eventually, they're going to be the ones on top. But they're very happy to unite against their common enemies in order to try and topple them as much as possible. And that's to remake society in this case.
Now, interestingly, Robin Simcox, who I believe used to work for you, became the last government's counter-extremism czar. I don't know if he still has that position.
He does right now.
He does, good. But I remember reading his name in the paper, they go, I know him, saying that these pro-Palestine marches have been infiltrated by organisations with connections to prescribed groups, by prescribed groups themselves, with connections to hostile regimes. And at that point, I thought, when that sort of intelligence is being given to the government, perhaps the sensible thing to do is to actually put that out in the clear light of day, so all the yummy mummies stop pretending and say, for this reason, this ends now, because I get the impression that that has fed directly into what we've seen happen, and the enemies of this country knew what they were doing.
Yes, look, I think that's quite clear. They were trying to push as much as possible. I think they were probably surprised at how much they were able to push and the results of what they were able to do, which is to co-opt ordinary people who thought they were protesting about a certain issue into a much more insidious political cause they're making. And so I think that should have been cracked down upon. We should have had more information about it. It falls into the same misinformation category as other things, because if you have a set of groups who have nefarious backers or intentions, so you don't talk about what they're doing, and other people are, buy into that by mistake or by accident, well, that is misinformation, isn't it? So we talk about that a lot. Why haven't we done a thing there?